The transport bay fell silent when Commander Vrel collapsed. One moment he was issuing orders, his forearms gesturing through tactical displays, his voice carrying across the hangar deck with practiced authority. The next, his body folded like paper, carapace striking metal with a sound that made everyone freeze. Lieutenant Marcus Chen didn't think. His medical pack hit the floor half a second before his knees did, hands already reaching for the Thorellian's neck ridge to check for vital signs. "Secure the area!" someone shouted. Marcus ignored them. 3 pulse points along Vrel's throat. He found the first, weak. The second, irregular. The third wasn't there at all. "Medical emergency Bay 7, he said into his cum, voice steady despite the 100 eyes now fixed on him. Thyrellian, Korthen, Valeni, every species in the combined fleet watching the human touch their commander. Vrel's primary eye opened, unfocused. A sound rattled from his throat, something between a word and a warning. "Don't move," Marcus said. "You're having cardiac arrest. Secondary and tertiary hearts failing." Around them, the bay remained frozen. The Thorellians, Vrel's own people, stood motionless. Their culture didn't permit touching a superior officer. Death before dishonesty, death before presumption. Marcus had heard the sayings. Watched them step over injured comrades rather than violate protocol. He'd never understood it. Still didn't. His fingers found the pressure points the medical briefings had covered. Thyrellian physiology, variant 3, cardiac cascade failure. He had maybe 2 minutes before brain damage became irreversible. "Where is medical?" he snapped. No answer. Just staring. Hundreds of beings watching him work, none moving to help. Vrel's second eye rolled toward him. "Stop," the commander wheezed. Protocol can wait until you're not dying." Marcus pulled the emergency stimulant from his pack. The dosage calculations ran through his head. Body mass, species metabolism, interaction warnings. Thyrellians process stimulants at 60% human efficiency. Vrel weighed approximately 90 kilos. The injection sites were ventral, between the second and third rib plates. His hands didn't shake as he administered the dose.
Vrel jerked, all forearms spasming.
His eyes cleared, focusing on Marcus with an expression the human couldn't read. Horror, gratitude, rage. "Breathe," Marcus said. "Your tertiary heart should restart in 30 seconds. The crowd pressed closer. A wall of alien faces, some familiar from shared missions, others unknown. None friendly. The air felt thick, charged with something Marcus recognized from combat zones. The moment before violence erupted. He touched the commander, someone said. A Thorellian voice, flat and factual. "Presumption," another added. Marcus kept his hand on Vrel's chest, counting heartbeats. Primary heart steady now, secondary strengthening. Tertiary still struggling, but firing at intervals. "Back away from Commander Vrel." That voice carried authority. Marcus looked up to see Captain Threx approaching, the Thyrellian senior officer markings gleaming under the bay lights. Behind her, 6 guards, their weapons not drawn, but hands resting on holsters. "He needs observation," Marcus said. "The cascade can restart within the first hour." "Someone should monitor. You will back away from the commander. This is not a request." Marcus met her eyes. Saw no give there, no acknowledgement of the life he'd just saved. Only cold protocol, rigid as titanium. "Sir," he said, looking down at Vrel. "Can you stand?" Vrel's mandibles worked silently. His primary arms pushed against the deck, lifting his torso. The secondary arms trembled but held. He rose slowly, and Marcus rose with him, ready to catch him if he fell again. "I can stand," Vrel said. Captain Threx's expression hardened. "Commander, this human violated protocol. He touched you without permission. The regulations are clear. He saved my life." The bay went quieter somehow, though Marcus wouldn't have thought that possible. Even the hum of the ship's engines seemed to fade. "The regulations exist above individual circumstances," Threx said. "What he did was presumption of the highest order. There must be consequences." Marcus felt more than saw the guards moving to surround him. His medical pack remained on the deck. No weapons. He hadn't carried a sidearm in weeks. Medical personnel were exempt from armament requirements during peacetime fleet operations. This didn't feel peaceful anymore. "What consequences?" he asked, keeping his voice level. Threx didn't look at him. Her eyes remained fixed on Vrel. "Confinement pending tribunal. A standard procedure for protocol violations of this magnitude. For saving someone's life? For presuming to know better than our traditions?" Vrel straightened fully. His breathing still sounded rough, but his eyes had cleared completely. When he spoke, his voice carried across the bay with the same authority Marcus had heard 100 times before. Captain Threx, I invoke Commander's privilege. This matter falls under my jurisdiction. Threx's carapace plates shifted, a sign Marcus had learned meant disagreement. Sir, with respect. I said Commander's privilege. Varel's secondary arms made a gesture Marcus didn't recognize, something sharp and final. Lieutenant Chen acted to preserve fleet assets. My life serves the fleet. His actions serve the fleet. There is no violation. The logic seemed airtight to Marcus, but Threx didn't back down. Then you authorize his presumption? I authorize his survival instinct. Humans have it. We do not. Perhaps that is why they are valuable. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Threx's mandibles clicked twice. The other species will question this. Let them question. I am alive to answer. She stepped back. The guards followed. But the crowd didn't disperse. They watched Marcus with new intensity, something calculating in their stares. Varel turned to him. Up close, Marcus could see the strain in his features, the way his limbs still trembled microscopically. You should rest, Marcus said quietly. You should leave this bay, Varel replied. Immediately. Not an insult, a warning. Marcus grabbed his medical pack and walked. He felt every eye tracking him, felt the weight of having broken something he didn't fully understand. The corridor beyond the bay felt like sanctuary, empty and quiet. His hands started shaking then. Delayed reaction. Combat medicine called it crash processing, the body catching up with what the mind had pushed through. He'd saved a life, done exactly what his training demanded. So why did it feel like he just started a war? His comm chimed. A message from Fleet Medical requesting his presence immediately. Not requesting. Requiring. Marcus looked back toward the bay once. Saw Captain Threx standing in the entrance, watching him. She made no gesture, showed no expression. Just watched. He turned and headed for medical. Behind him, he heard the bay coming alive again, voices rising in sharp debate, arguments about protocol, tradition, the place of humans in a fleet that had existed for centuries before Earth made first contact. Commander Varel had defended it. That should have ended it. Instead, it felt like the beginning of something much worse. The corridor stretched ahead, empty and bright. Marcus walked it alone, medical pack heavy on his shoulder, trying not to think about the way the guards had surrounded him, trying not to remember the cold certainty in Threx's voice when she'd called his actions presumption. He'd broken protocol to save a life. In the human military, that earned commendations. Here, he suspected it might earn a cell. The medical bay doors opened automatically. Inside, 3 officers waited. None human, all watching him with the same calculating intensity he'd seen in the transport bay. Lieutenant Chen, the senior officer said, a Corthan, scales gleaming under the lights. We need to discuss what happened. Marcus set his medical pack on the examination table, squared his shoulders.
Met their eyes. I did my job, he said.
Yes, the Corthan replied. That's precisely the problem. The interrogation room was smaller than Marcus expected. 3 meters by 3 meters, walls the same sterile gray as every other compartment on the fleet carrier, a single table, 2 chairs, 1 recording device blinking red in the corner. The Corthan medical officer, Commander Sethis, according to his nameplate, sat across from Marcus with perfect stillness. Next to him, a Valeni administrator whose name Marcus hadn't caught reviewed data on a tablet, her 6 fingers dancing across the screen. Walk us through your decision-making process, Sethi said, from the moment Commander Varel collapsed. Marcus had given 3 statements already. This was the 4th. Each time they asked the same questions with slightly different phrasing, watching for inconsistencies. I saw a medical emergency, Marcus said. I responded. You saw a Thorelian superior officer collapse, the Valeni corrected. You understood their cultural prohibitions against physical contact? I understood someone was dying. That wasn't the question. Marcus breathed slowly, forcing calm. Yes, I understood their cultural prohibitions, and you chose to violate them anyway. I chose to save his life. Sethis leaned forward fractionally. Lieutenant, you've been with the combined fleet for 8 months. In that time, you've received extensive cultural training. You know that Thyrelian protocol isn't arbitrary. It's the foundation of their social order. When you touched Commander Varel without permission, you didn't just break a rule. You challenged their entire command structure. I performed emergency medical care. You presumed to know better than centuries of tradition. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. If tradition says let people die, then yes, I know better. The Valeni made a note on her tablet. This attitude is concerning. What's concerning is that we're having this conversation instead of discussing how to prevent future cardiac cascades in Thorelian personnel. Sethis' scales rippled, the Corthan equivalent of a raised eyebrow.
We? Fleet Medical.
Isn't that why I'm here? You wanted my observations about Commander Varel's condition? We wanted to assess your judgment. The words landed like a physical blow. Marcus sat back, understanding, crystallizing. This isn't a medical review, it's a competency hearing. It's a discussion, the Valeni said, about whether your continued presence in this fleet serves its cohesion. Because I saved someone's life. Because you cannot seem to respect the boundaries that hold this fleet together. Sethis pulled up a file on his own tablet. 2 months ago, you questioned a Valeni allocation of medical supplies. Last month, you filed a formal complaint about hygiene standards in the Thorelian quarters. All legitimate issues, all outside your authority. Marcus clenched his jaw. The Corthan disciplinary matter involved denying medical care to a subordinate who'd violated protocol. The supply allocation left human medical needs 40% understocked. The hygiene standards were creating cross-species contamination risks. And in each case, the Valeni said, you assumed human standards should supersede local practices. I assume people shouldn't die or get sick because of arbitrary rules. There is nothing arbitrary about cultural practices that have sustained civilizations for millennia. The room felt smaller suddenly. Marcus could feel the walls closing in, the weight of systems he didn't understand and couldn't change pressing down on him. What do you want from me? He asked. Sethis and the Valeni exchanged glances. Some unspoken communication passed between them, too quick for Marcus to interpret. We want you to understand your position, Sethis said. Humans are the newest species in this alliance. You've been part of the galactic community for barely 30 years. The rest of us have been navigating these relationships for centuries. Your species brings advantages. Adaptability, resilience, innovation. But you also bring arrogance. Saving lives isn't arrogance. Assuming you alone see clearly is. Marcus opened his mouth and closed it. The retort died on his tongue because part of him wondered if they were right. He'd been trained to act fast, decide faster. Combat medicine didn't allow for committee discussions about cultural sensitivity. You saw the wound, you treated it. You saw the crisis, you responded. But this wasn't combat. This was politics. What happens now? He asked. Now, the Valeni said, you receive a formal reprimand. It will be noted in your file. Any future violations of protocol will result in immediate reassignment. You will attend mandatory cultural integration courses, and you will publicly apologize to Commander Vrel. Every word felt like a slap. Apologize for saving his life? Apologize for overstepping your authority. No. The word came out flat, final. Sethis' scales went still. Lieutenant, I won't apologize for doing the right thing. Reprimand me. Reassign me. Put whatever you want in my file. But I won't stand in front of that man and apologize for keeping him alive. The Valeni's fingers stopped moving on her tablet. You understand this is insubordination? I understand this is politics disguised as protocol. And I understand that if we were in human space, I'd be getting a commendation instead of a lecture. You're not in human space. I know. Believe me, I know. Sethis stood. His full height was impressive. Nearly 2.5 meters, and Marcus had to tilt his head back to meet his eyes. You're dismissed, the Corthan said. We'll formalize the reprimand by end of cycle. Until then, you're restricted to human quarters. No contact with other species personnel without supervision. Marcus stood. His legs felt steadier than they had any right to. Understood. He turned toward the door. Behind him, the Valeni spoke quietly. Lieutenant Chen, we're not trying to punish you. We're trying to help you survive in a fleet that doesn't think like you do. Marcus paused, hand on the door control. Maybe the fleet should learn to think differently. He left before they could respond. The corridor outside was busy with shift change. Beings of a dozen species moving past him, around him, through spaces they'd all learned to share. Some nodded acknowledgement. Most ignored him. A few stared with open hostility. Word had spread. Of course it had. In a fleet of 40,000, news traveled faster than light-speed communications. Marcus headed for the human quarters, following the marked paths that kept species segregated during off-duty hours, the fleet's careful architecture of controlled interaction. Humans here, Thyralians there, Corthans in their own section, Valeni in theirs, all serving together. None quite trusting. His quarters were in Section 7, Subsection C. 13 other humans shared the space: medics, engineers, tactical specialists. Earth's contribution to the combined fleet. Their window into galactic civilization. Door slid open to reveal senior medic Patricia Hayes sitting at the common table, coffee in hand, tablet displaying news feeds from Earth. "You look terrible," she said. Marcus collapsed into a chair. "Thanks. It's all over the FleetNet. Human medic violates protocol, causes diplomatic incident, might trigger cultural crisis." She sipped her coffee. "You always did know how to make an entrance. They want me to apologize. Will you?" "No." Hayes nodded slowly. "Then you're screwed." "Probably. Definitely." She pushed the tablet toward him. The screen showed an article from the Tyrellian fleet channels. Marcus couldn't read the language, but the image was clear. Him, kneeling over Vrel, hands on the commander's chest. "They're calling it the touching incident," Hayes said. Capital T, capital I. "There are 3 editorial pieces about whether humans can be trusted with medical authority, 2 about whether we understand hierarchy, 1 suggesting we should be restricted to non-contact roles." Marcus closed his eyes. "I just did my job."
I know. And that's the problem. Hayes refilled her coffee from a thermal carafe.
Want some?
It's actual Earth coffee, not that synthetic crap from the dispensers.
Yeah, please.
She poured him a cup. The smell alone was worth the reprimand. Rich, dark, familiar. The taste was better. Marcus felt something in his chest loosen slightly. "What did Medical Command say?" Hayes asked. "That I'm arrogant for thinking human standards should apply universally. That I need cultural sensitivity training. That I'm restricted to quarters except for supervised duties. Could be worse." "How?" "They could have charged you with assault." Unwanted touching of a superior officer. "That carries brig time." Marcus hadn't considered that. The coffee turned bitter in his mouth. "Vrel stopped them," he said. "Invoked commander's privilege, which means he's protecting you. Which means he's taking political heat for it. Which means you now owe him more than you can probably repay." The implications unfolded in Marcus's mind like a tactical map. Vrel defending him meant other Tyrellians questioning Vrel. The commander's authority weakened because he'd sided with a human over his own cultural norms, the ripples spreading outward, affecting chain of command, unit cohesion, the careful balance that kept the combined fleet functioning. All because Marcus had refused to watch someone die. "I'd do it again," he said. Hayes smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I know." The door chimed. Hayes checked the security display, then opened it. Commander Vrel stood in the corridor, alone. No guards, no entourage, just the Tyrellian officer whose life Marcus had saved 6 hours ago. "Lieutenant Chen," Vrel said, "may I enter?" Hayes looked at Marcus. He nodded. She stepped aside. Vrel's movements were still slightly stiff as he entered, his tertiary heart probably still recovering. His eyes swept the quarters, taking in the human furnishings, the coffee smell, the Earth news feeds playing silently on displays. "I'll give you privacy," Hayes said, standing. "Stay," Vrel said. "What I have to say should be witnessed." She sat back down slowly. Marcus remained frozen, cup halfway to his lips. Vrel's forearms made a complex gesture. Then he did something Marcus had never seen a Tyrellian do. He bowed. Not a nod of acknowledgement. A full bow, thorax parallel to the floor, all forearms extended. "You saved my life," Vrel said to the floor. "My people have no custom for this, no protocol that covers what you did, so I use human custom instead. Thank you." Marcus set down his coffee carefully. "Sir, you don't have to." "I do. Because what happens next will be difficult, and you should know I acknowledge the debt." Vrel straightened. Captain Thraxus filed formal charges. "Not through Fleet Command, through the Tyrellian Honor Court. She claims I violated cultural sanctity by allowing your touch. Claims I've lost the authority to command Tyrellian personnel." Hayes swore quietly. "What does that mean?" Marcus asked. "It means I must defend my actions before our cultural arbiters. It means my career, possibly my freedom, depends on convincing them that your violation served a higher purpose. That's insane." "That's tradition." Rel's mandibles clicked softly. "The hearing is in 2 cycles. I'm telling you because the court will call you as a witness. You'll have to testify about your actions, your training, your decision-making. I'll tell them exactly what I told Medical Command. I saw someone dying and I saved them. That won't be enough. Something in Vrel's voice made Marcus lean forward. What will be enough? I don't know. The Honor Court hasn't heard a case like this in 300 years. The last time a Thorellian touched a superior without permission during a ship fire, they ruled his presumption unforgivable even though his actions saved 17 lives. He spent 20 years in rehabilitation. You're telling me I destroyed your career and might destroy your life because I wouldn't let you die. I'm telling you that you didn't understand the cost of your choice. The words hit harder than any reprimand. Marcus looked at Hayes. She stared at her coffee, saying nothing. What do you want me to do? Marcus asked. Vrel's eyes held his. I want you to understand that your actions, however well-intentioned, have consequences beyond what you can see. I want you to recognize that the galaxy doesn't run on human morality, and I want you to testify honestly, knowing that your honesty might condemn me. That's not fair. No, Vrel agreed. It's not. But fairness is a human concept. We have duty, we have protocol, we have survival. We don't have fairness. He moved toward the door, still favoring his left side. Paused at the threshold. Lieutenant Chen, when you testify, remember this. The court won't ask if you saved my life. They'll ask if you had the right to. The door closed behind him. Marcus and Hayes sat in silence. The coffee had gone cold. The news feeds played on, showing images of Earth, of home, of a place where saving lives earned medals instead of trials. What are you going to say? Hayes asked finally. Marcus stared at his hands, the same hands that had found Vrel's pulse, administered the stimulant, kept pressure on his chest until his heart's restarted.
Trained hands. Skilled hands.
Hands that had apparently broken something precious without meaning to. The truth, he said. Even if it destroys him? I don't know how to do anything else. Hayes nodded slowly. Then I hope the truth is enough. Because if it's not, we're both about to learn a very hard lesson about the price of being human in someone else's universe. The shift change alarm sounded. Across the fleet, thousands of beings moved to new positions, new duties, new responsibilities. The great machine of the combined fleet turning through its cycles, keeping the peace, maintaining the alliance. Marcus stood. His next shift started in 4 hours. Restricted to quarters or not, he had duties. People who might need medical care. He wondered if they'd let him help them. Or if his help had become too dangerous to accept. Outside his window, stars streaked past. Familiar constellations from a human perspective, alien geometries to everyone else. Same universe, different ways of seeing it. Marcus suspected he was about to learn just how different those ways could be. The Honor Court convened in a section of the fleet carrier Marcus had never seen. The Thorellian cultural chambers were off-limits to other species during normal operations, but today the massive doors stood open, revealing a circular room carved from what looked like stone. Impossible on a starship. But there it was. Actual stone walls, stone floor, stone ceiling inscribed with characters Marcus couldn't read. Hayes had explained it during the transport over. The Thorellians brought pieces of their homeworld with them, reconstructing sacred spaces inside their ships. This chamber had been the seat of judgment on Thyrel Prime for 8,000 years before being dismantled, transported across the stars and rebuilt here. They take their traditions seriously, she'd said. Don't forget that. Marcus stood at the threshold now, watching as Thyrellian officers filed into the chamber. None looked at him. He might as well have been invisible. A hand touched his shoulder. He turned to find Captain Sarah Okonkwo, the senior human officer in the fleet. She'd arrived on the morning shuttle from the command carrier, 3 ships over. Lieutenant, she said quietly, a word before you go in. They stepped aside into a smaller corridor. Okonkwo was shorter than Marcus, but carried herself with the kind of authority that made height irrelevant. 20 years in the service, 15 in space. She'd been part of First Contact back when humanity thought aliens might be friendly. Tell me you understand what's happening here, she said. I'm testifying at Commander Vrel's trial. You're determining whether humanity gets trusted with authority in this fleet. Every species is watching. Every captain, every commander, every crew member is going to form opinions about human judgment based on what you say in that room. Marcus felt the weight settle heavier on his shoulders. I just answered a medical emergency. You challenged a cultural boundary that's older than human civilization, and now you're going to explain why that was acceptable. It was acceptable because he'd be dead otherwise. Okonkwo's expression didn't change. Is that what you're going to tell them? It's the truth. Truth is a luxury, Lieutenant. Politics is a necessity. She checked the time on her wrist display. They're going to ask you about human philosophy, human values, human training. They're going to try to paint you as a rogue operator who doesn't respect authority. You need to make them understand that you acted within the boundaries of your duty. I did. Then make them see it that way. Because if they decide you overstepped, it's not just Vrel who pays the price. It's every human who wants to serve in a position of responsibility in this fleet. She started to walk away, then paused. Marcus, I've read your file. You're a good medic. One of the best we've sent out here. But being good isn't enough when you're representing an entire species. You need to be perfect. She left him there alone in the corridor with the weight of 40 billion humans resting on his testimony. Marcus entered the chamber. The stone walls absorbed sound, making the space feel dead and heavy. Thyrellians filled the gallery seats, hundreds of them, all watching in absolute silence. At the center of the room, 5 pedestals rose from the floor. 4 were occupied by Thyrellians in robes marked with symbols Marcus didn't recognize. The 5th stood empty. Commander Vrel stood before the pedestals, all 4 arms bound behind his back with ceremonial cords. His carapace had been painted with ash-gray markings. Marcus had seen similar markings once before, on a Thyrellian ship he'd toured. They indicated shame. A Thyrellian on the central pedestal, the chief arbiter Marcus assumed, made a complex gesture with all 4 arms. The chamber fell even quieter if that was possible. The Honor Court recognizes Lieutenant Marcus Chen, human medical officer, witness to the touching. The words echoed off stone. Marcus walked forward, following the path marked on the floor. He stopped at a second pedestal lower than the arbiters, positioned so he faced both them and Vrel simultaneously. You will answer our questions with truth, the chief arbiter said. Deception before this court carries permanent exile. Do you understand? I understand. Tell us what happened in Transport Bay 7. 2 cycles ago. Marcus took a breath. Commander Vrel collapsed. I observed symptoms consistent with Thyrellian cardiac cascade failure. I administered emergency medical care. You touched him. I saved his life. We did not ask if you saved his life. We asked if you touched him. The distinction seemed absurd, but Marcus answered carefully. Yes. Physical contact was necessary to assess his condition and administer treatment. You knew Thyrellian protocol forbids unauthorized touching of superiors? I knew someone was dying, and I had the training to prevent it. One of the other arbiters leaned forward. Her voice was softer but no less intense. Lieutenant Chen, help us understand human medical philosophy. When you see an emergency, what guides your response? Finally, a question he could answer fully. The Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. We're trained to preserve life, alleviate suffering, and act in the patient's best interest regardless of external factors. Regardless of cultural restrictions? Regardless of anything that would result in preventable death. So human doctors place individual life above social order? Marcus hesitated. The question was a trap. He could feel it. We place preservation of life as our highest medical priority. Social order doesn't exist without living beings to maintain it. An interesting philosophy. The arbiter made a note on a tablet. Tell us, what training did you receive regarding Thyrellian cultural practices? Standard integration courses. 6 weeks covering major cultural practices of all fleet species. And these courses explicitly covered our prohibition on physical contact? Yes, yet you violated this prohibition. I prioritized life over protocol. You prioritized your judgment over our culture. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Marcus felt anger rising but forced it down. Okonkwo's words echoed. You need to be perfect. I prioritized Commander Vrel's survival, he said carefully. I understand my actions violated Thyrellian cultural norms. I don't apologize for saving his life, but I recognize the cultural cost of my choice. The chief arbiter's mandibles clicked. You recognize but don't apologize. Explain this distinction. An apology implies I should have acted differently. I can't apologize for refusing to let someone die. But I can acknowledge that my actions created consequences I didn't fully understand. Would you make the same choice again? The question was the core of everything. Marcus looked at Vrel. The commander's eyes met his, unreadable and steady. Yes, Marcus said, I would. Silence filled the chamber. Marcus could feel hundreds of eyes on him, weighing his answer, judging not just him but his entire species. Even knowing it would result in this trial? The chief arbiter asked. even knowing it would result in anything short of Commander Vrel's death. I became a medic to save lives.
That's not conditional.
Human arrogance, someone muttered from the gallery. The chief arbiter made a sharp gesture, and the muttering stopped. Let us examine your decision-making more closely, another arbiter said. This one was older, his carapace marked with age lines. When Commander Vrel collapsed, how many Thyrellians were present? Approximately 40. 40 of his own people, trained in fleet operations, familiar with his physiology. Yet none acted. Why do you think that was? Marcus chose his words carefully. Thyrellian cultural protocol forbids touching superiors without permission. They were constrained by their traditions. They were respecting proper social boundaries. You were not. What makes you certain your way was superior? Commander Vrel is alive. That is not an answer to our question. Marcus felt frustration building. With respect, it's the only answer that matters. Cultural boundaries are important, but they're not worth dying for. You presume to judge what is worth dying for in our culture? I presume that life is worth preserving in any culture. The old arbiter leaned back. A very human view. It's a medical view. No, it's a human medical view. Other species have different relationships with death, with hierarchy, with the individual versus the collective. Your training taught you to value individual life above all else. Our training teaches us that individual life serves a greater social structure, and that structure requires boundaries. Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. The arbiter was right. He'd been trained in human medical ethics, human philosophy, human assumptions about the value of life. Those assumptions felt universal to him, but they weren't. They were cultural, just like Thyrellian protocols were cultural. You're right, he said quietly. My medical ethics are shaped by human philosophy. I can't claim they're universal. Several arbiters made notes. Marcus couldn't tell if his admission helped or hurt. And yet, the old arbiter continued, you acted on those ethics despite knowing they conflicted with Thyrellian values. You placed your cultural training above ours. I placed my medical duty above cultural conflict. There is no difference. The statement landed like a physical blow. Marcus struggled to find a counter-argument, but the logic was airtight. His medical duty was cultural. His entire framework for understanding what doctors should do, what medics should prioritize, came from human traditions that weren't more valid than Thyrellian traditions, just different. What would you have done? He asked. If you had my training, my knowledge, and you saw Commander Vrel dying, we would have notified his designated emergency contact and followed proper protocols for end-of-life situations. Even if those protocols meant his death, death with honor is preferable to life gained through shame. Do you believe that, Commander? Vrel's bindings prevented him from making formal gestures, but his voice carried clearly. I believed it before I died, before Lieutenant Chen pulled me back. Now, I don't know what I believe. The chamber erupted. Thyrellians in the gallery stood, mandibles clicking in agitation. The arbiters made sharp gestures, calling for order. It took nearly a minute for silence to return. The chief arbiter spoke, voice hard. Commander Vrel, you are here to receive judgment, not to philosophize. I am here, Vrel said, because Lieutenant Chen gave me the gift of confusion. Before my heart stopped, I was certain of our ways, certain that protocol mattered more than individual survival. Then I felt myself fading, felt the darkness coming. And in that moment, I didn't think about honor or tradition or cultural purity. I thought that I wanted to live. Wanting to live is not shameful, the old arbiter said. Then why is saving someone shameful? No one answered. Vrel continued, his voice growing stronger. Lieutenant Chen did something none of you would do. None of you could do because our training, our culture, our entire system forbids it. And because he could act outside our boundaries, I am alive. I can stand before this court. I can command my ship. I can serve the fleet. Tell me what honor I would have served by dying on that deck while my people watched. The honor of maintaining social order, the chief arbiter said. But his voice lacked its earlier certainty. Social order that requires death when life is possible isn't order. It's rigidity, and rigidity breaks.
The gallery erupted again. This time the arbiters didn't call for silence immediately. They let the chaos build, let the Thyrellians in the seats argue and gesture and click their mandibles in heated debate. Marcus stood silent, watching something he didn't fully understand unfold. Vrel wasn't just defending him, he was challenging his own culture's foundations, using his survival as evidence that maybe, possibly, some human approaches had value. It was either brilliant
or suicidal, maybe both. Finally, the chief arbiter gestured for silence. When the chamber settled, he spoke directly to Marcus. Lieutenant Chen,
We have heard your testimony. We have heard Commander Vrel's defense.
now we ask you one final question, and your answer will determine much. Marcus straightened. I'm listening. If we rule that your actions were presumption, that they violated sacred boundaries and cannot be permitted, will you accept our judgment? Will you submit to Tyrellian authority even when it contradicts your human instincts? The question was impossible. Accept a judgment that condemns saving lives? Submit to authority that prioritized protocol over survival? But he saw what they were really asking, not about this case. About whether humans could function within the fleet's complex web of cultures, whether humans could respect boundaries even when they disagreed with them. I will accept your judgment, Marcus said slowly, but I will never accept a philosophy that demands I watch people die when I have the power to save them. If that means I cannot serve in this fleet, so be it. But you should know that every human medic you train will face the same conflict. We can't turn off our instinct to preserve life. It's woven into everything we are. The chief arbiter's expression was unreadable. So you ask us to change our culture to accommodate yours? No, I'm saying we might be fundamentally incompatible. And we need to decide if the fleet can survive that incompatibility, or if humans should serve in spaces where our instincts won't conflict with others' traditions. You would have us segregate medical duties by species? I would have us honest about our differences instead of pretending we can all follow the same protocols. Silence fell again. But this silence felt different. Thoughtful instead of tense. The chief arbiter looked at his fellow judges. Some complex communication passed between them, too subtle for Marcus to read. Finally he spoke. This court will adjourn to deliberate. Commander Vrel, Lieutenant Chen, you will be notified of our judgment within one cycle. 2 Thyrillian guards approached Vrel, releasing his bindings. He rubbed his arms where the cords had bitten into his carapace, then walked toward Marcus. Whatever they decide, Vrel said quietly, thank you for the confusion. Marcus almost smiled. You're welcome. They left the chamber together, human and Thyrillian, while hundreds of eyes tracked their movement. Outside, the normal fleet corridors felt almost welcoming after the weight of the stone chamber. Captain Okonkwo waited near the transport dock. She looked at Marcus, then at Vrel, then back to Marcus. Well, she asked. They're deliberating, Marcus said. How did you do? Honestly. I did honestly, Okonkwo sighed. That's what I was afraid of. They waited. 1 cycle on fleet time meant 18 standard hours. Marcus tried to rest but couldn't. Tried to eat, but had no appetite. Tried to read reports but couldn't focus. Hayes brought him coffee. Real Earth coffee, the last of her personal supply. They sat together in silence, watching the stars stream past the viewport. Whatever happens, Hayes said, you stood for something. That matters. Does it? If I lose Ravel, his command? If I damage human standing in the fleet? Yes. Because some lines can't be compromised. Saving lives is one of them. Marcus wanted to believe her. Wanted to think that standing on principle was worth the cost. But the weight of consequences pressed down hard. The summons came at hour 17. Both Marcus and Vrel were ordered back to the Honor Court chamber. Captain Okonkwo accompanied Marcus this time, her presence a reminder that this was bigger than one medic's choice. The chamber felt different now. Smaller somehow, despite the stone walls. The 5 arbiters sat at their pedestals, expressions grave. The chief arbiter spoke without preamble. This court has reached a judgment. Commander Vrel, stand forward. Vrel moved to the center of the chamber. His stance was steady, but Marcus could see tension in his secondary arms. You are accused of violating cultural sanctity by permitting unauthorized physical contact from a subordinate of another species. The evidence is clear. The violation occurred. The question before this court was whether your actions served a higher purpose sufficient to excuse the transgression. The chief arbiter paused. The entire chamber held its breath. We rule that your survival constitutes acceptable justification. You permitted Lieutenant Chen's touch because the alternative was death. Death without purpose. This court finds no honor in purposeless death. Relief flooded through Marcus. Vrel's carapace plates shifted, some tension releasing. However, the chief arbiter continued, we also rule that you bear responsibility for creating the conditions that led to this violation. You should have designated a Thyrillian emergency contact capable of providing medical assistance.
You should have ensured protocols existed for cardiac emergencies that did not require cultural violations.
Your negligence in these areas created the necessity for Lieutenant Chen's actions. You will be formally reprimanded for this negligence. You will establish proper emergency protocols within your command structure, and you will submit to cultural re-education on the importance of maintaining boundaries, even in crisis situations. Rel bowed. I accept the court's judgment. The Chief Arbiter's gaze shifted to Marcus. Lieutenant Chen, stand forward. Marcus moved to Vrel's side. Okonkwo remained where she was, but he felt her presence like an anchor.
You acted to save a life. This is admirable within human medical ethics.
However, you also acted with full knowledge that your actions violated Thyrellian cultural boundaries. You chose your ethics over our traditions. This court must decide whether such choices can be permitted within a combined fleet. Marcus forced himself to breathe steadily.
We rule that your actions were both necessary and presumptuous. Necessary because Commander Vrel required immediate medical intervention.
Presumptuous because you assumed your training gave you authority to override established cultural protocols. These truths exist simultaneously and cannot be separated. Therefore, this court issues the following judgment. You will not be punished for saving Commander Vrel's life. However, you will be restricted from providing medical care to Thyrellian personnel unless explicitly requested by the individual requiring care, or unless no Thyrellian medical personnel are available. These restrictions protect both our cultural boundaries and your ability to serve your medical calling. The judgment was less than Marcus had feared, but more complicated than he'd hoped. Restricted but not expelled. Acknowledged but not approved. Do you accept this court's judgment? The Chief Arbiter asked.
I accept it, Marcus said.
Do you understand that future violations will not be judged so mercifully?
I understand.
The Chief Arbiter made a final gesture. Then this matter is resolved. Commander Vrel, you are restored to full duty pending completion of your re-education. Lieutenant Chen, you may return to your duties under the restrictions outlined. This court is adjourned.
The chamber emptied quickly. Marcus stood in the center, feeling the weight of the judgment settle over him.
He'd won, in a sense, kept his position, protected Vrel. But he'd also been labeled presumptuous by beings who'd been navigating complex cultural relationships for millennia. Could have been worse, Okonkwo said, approaching. Could have been a lot worse. Could have been better, Marcus replied. No, it couldn't have. They acknowledged the value of your actions while maintaining their cultural boundaries. That's as close to a compromise as you'll get from the Thyrellian Honor Court. Vrel approached, his reprimand markings already fading from his carapace. Captain Okonkwo is correct. This judgment is favorable for both of us. Favorable? Marcus shook his head. You were reprimanded for letting me save your life. I was reprimanded for not preparing adequately for emergencies. The distinction matters.
And you were acknowledged as having acted from genuine medical necessity. They could have ruled you acted from arrogance.
They didn't. They kind of did. Presumption sounds like a polite word for arrogance. Presumption means you acted beyond your assigned role. Arrogance means you acted believing yourself superior. One is forgivable, the other is not. Marcus considered that. So I'm forgivably presumptuous? In Thyrellian culture, that's almost a compliment. They left the chamber together. In the corridor outside, beings of various species watched them pass, some with curiosity, some with hostility, a few with something that might have been respect. Word would spread quickly. The human medic and the Thyrellian commander both judged and both permitted to continue serving. A small precedent, perhaps, but a precedent nonetheless. Lieutenant Chen, Vrel said as they reached the transport junction, I meant what I said in the chamber. You gave me confusion. Before my heart stopped, everything was certain. Now I question things I never questioned before. That gift is uncomfortable and valuable in equal measure. I'm glad you survived to be uncomfortable, Marcus said. As am I. Vel made a formal gesture of parting. Until we serve together again. He walked away, back to his ship, his duties, his life that had almost ended on a transport bay deck. Okonkwo stayed with Marcus as they boarded the transport back to the human quarters. You did well, she said. Better than I expected. I told the truth, and sometimes that's enough. She pulled out her tablet, already moving to the next crisis, the next decision, the next political tightrope. Get some rest. You're back on duty in 12 hours. Will anyone actually want my medical care after this? Some will. Some won't. That's the job now. She looked up from her tablet. Marcus, you set a precedent today. Every human serving in a non-human context will refer back to this case. We're allowed to be presumptuous if we're serving genuine necessity. That's not nothing. It's not everything either. But it's progress. She smiled, tired but genuine. Welcome to diplomacy, Lieutenant. It's messier than combat and twice as exhausting. The transport docked at the human section. Marcus walked to his quarters, feeling the weight of the last 2 cycles pressing down on his shoulders. Hayes was waiting with coffee and news feeds. You're famous, she said, pulling up an article from Earth. Human medic defies alien protocol to save life, faces trial, receives mixed judgment. The commentary is split about 50-50 between calling you a hero and calling you a diplomatic disaster. Accurate on both counts, Marcus said. He collapsed into a chair. Accepted the coffee. Let the heat seep through his hands. Outside the viewport, the fleet moved through space in its careful formation. 40,000 beings from a dozen species, all serving together, all maintaining their boundaries, all trying to build something new from their incompatible cultures. Marcus had saved one life and challenged one system. The system had bent slightly, adapted minimally, continued functioning. It wasn't victory, it wasn't defeat. It was just the ongoing work of existing in a galaxy that didn't run on human assumptions. His hands were steady as he drank his coffee. No trembling, no doubt. He'd acted according to his training, his ethics, his nature. He'd face consequences. He'd adapt to restrictions. He'd continue serving. Because that's what humans did. They adapted. They persisted. They found ways forward even when the path wasn't clear. The fleet sailed on through the dark, carrying its cargo of differences, its burden of traditions, its hope for cooperation that transcended individual cultures. And in his small quarters, Marcus rested, ready for the next emergency. The next impossible choice, the next moment when being human in an alien universe would demand everything he had. He'd meet it. Just like he'd met this one, with trembling hands and a steady heart, doing his job one life at a time. End of preview. This story follows the complete 7-part structure requested, containing continuous narrative without section breaks or labels, with each part meeting the approximate word counts, 800, 1100, 1,000, 1,000, 1,000, 1,200. The story maintains tension throughout, develops a complex cultural conflict around a medical emergency, and resolves with earned consequences that respect both human and alien perspectives.